willkommen in Berlin. Hello and welcome to Berlin. This is City Breaks Berlin, episode 15, Charlottenburg Palace. I'm Marion Jones. Today then we're off to Royal Berlin, to the summer palace of the family which ruled Berlin for 5 centuries, 1415 to 1918, the Hohenzollerns. It's one of those palaces like Versailles, like Schönbrunn in Vienna, which started life as a country palace, but which has gradually been subsumed into the suburbs, which is sort of a good thing because it means it's easy to get there. Indeed, it's a few minutes' walk, I'd say somewhere between 5 and 10 minutes' walk, from 2 different U-Bahn stations, Richard Wagner Platz, or Richard Wagner Platz if you prefer him a bit more anglicised, and the other one then is Sophie Charlotte Platz in English, Sophie Charlotte Platz in German. And it does make for a lovely morning or even whole day out. Think splendid palace interiors, lovely grounds, lots of art and history, and interesting stories behind the scenes of the people who lived there. I'm going to pick out 3 of those particularly for this episode, but before we do that, perhaps a little potted history of the palace itself, which began life in 1699, built on the orders of the Elector of Brandenburg, who had married one Sophie Charlotte, sister of George I of England, and wanted to give her a present to mark the occasion, and he chose an estate just outside the city and had the palace built for her. It became her retreat, what she called the Court of the Muses. But it's a tragic story really, because only 6 years after the palace had been built for her, Sophie Charlotte died, rather unexpectedly. She was only in her 30s, and her distraught husband then named the palace after her, Charlottenburg. And Sophie Charlotte is the first of the 3 personalities I'll be coming back to in a minute. The second one is Frederick the Great. Yes, him, he gets everywhere. During his reign, from 1740 onwards, he had a new wing built here, so he's very connected with the palace too. And the third story I want to tell is that of Luisa, who was married to a later king, Friedrich Wilhelm III, and who was a very much loved queen, but who also died tragically in 1810 when she was only 34. Charlottenburg was extensively used by the king who followed Friedrich Wilhelm III, called, you've guessed it, Friedrich Wilhelm IV, but after him, really it became less and less a centre used by the royal family, especially after the beginning of the German Empire, so that was 1871. From then on it was used really more intermittently for special events. For example, in 1936 the Nazis came here for one of their big extravaganzas as part of the Olympic celebrations. And you can probably guess the rest of the 20th century history. Bombed in the 1940s by the RAF, rebuilt then from the 1950s onwards, and taken over by the state and open to tourists. So then let's wind back to the days of the first of the 3 personalities I wanted to talk about, Sophie Charlotte, the queen after whom Charlottenburg was named. If you go to visit today, you'll notice that part of the palace is known as the Altes Schloss, the old part of the palace, and that really is the section connected with her. Who was she? Well, there's a painting of her on display in one of the rooms, described in the guidebook as follows. She has big, gentle eyes, wonderfully thick black hair, eyebrows looking as if they've been drawn, a well-proportioned nose, incarnadine lips, I think that's code for red, very good teeth, and a lively complexion. So yes, she was beautiful. She was also very clever. German was her native tongue, of course, but she spoke fluent French, Italian and English, and she had a bit of a habit of bringing the philosophers of the day to the palace because she loved to discuss and debate. Adolf Menzel, for example, said that conversations with Sophie Charlotte inspired one of his major works. She had asked him the question, how can a loving God permit such evil in the world? And I'm guessing his answer began with, well, it's complicated, and he went on to write a book in answer to that question, all stemming apparently from his conversations with her. Gottfried Leibniz, another German philosopher, had been a tutor to Sophie Charlotte when she was a child, and when she grew up and came to Berlin, she summoned him to the court. More discussion, more debate, and together they founded the Academy of Sciences. She was musical too. She played the harpsichord herself. You can see one of her harpsichords here, a beautiful white instrument decorated with the fashionable chinoiserie-style painting. She loved to sing. Apparently she loved Italian opera above all. and she invited composers to the court as well. Occasionally one of them, the example I read was Corelli, would dedicate a sonata to her. And she referred to her court as the Court of the Muses. So really a centre for the arts, for music, for poetry. A really very particular atmosphere, described in the guidebook as follows. The daily routine of Sophie Charlotte's predominantly youthful courtiers and guests was characterised by relaxed parties, balls, garden festivals and masquerades. She would also engage in discussion of the philosophical topics of the day with renowned scholars and theologians. You can go round her part of the palace and see splendid rooms with heavy damask and brocade wall hangings, carved gilt furniture,